violated. Yeah. Worldwide.
Thank you for tuning in to a special late night, Friday night / Saturday early morning edition of the MMA Podcast. If you're staying up late for the UFC South Korea card, that's going to kick off in about 2.5 hours here. So whether you're listening live or listening after the fact, we appreciate you doing so. We're going to be talking about last weekend's card, the TUF Latin America 2, Magny vs. Gastelum. A little bit of a controversial main event there, a couple fight announcements, not too much news this week, and of course the aforementioned UFC South Korea card going off in a few hours. We're going to break that down too. Thanks for listening. Let's do it.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast!
Hell yeah, it is the MMA Podcast. It is, if you're listening live, October 28th, unless you're on the West Coast, where it is the 27th and will be the 28th in 36 minutes. It is the MMA Podcast. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at the MMA Podcast, themmmapodcast.com, a website I rarely update, but links to the subscription links are up there, iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, all that fun stuff. We're joined by Sweet Pappy Jones. I hope all those listening had a nice Thanksgiving a couple days ago. Pat, did you have a nice Thanksgiving? Did you do it up with family? Did you stuff your face with turkey? Did you have a few nice brews? What did you do?
Well, good evening there, Jake. Yes, it was a lovely Thanksgiving overall over here in Southern California. Me and the family, we got together. We went to one of our finest local steakhouses. We couldn't be bothered with the cooking and cleaning and all this manner of business. So we went out, and of course, I'm not going to a steakhouse to get a turkey, although they did have a nice turkey course going for the lunch menu. But I opted for the filet mignon, as I am wont to do, with a nice red. Not the house red, but a nice red. And it was a fantastic time. Had some beers, had some of the top shelf handmade cigars. It was just a pimpin' Thanksgiving over here. Although somewhat an affront to my Native American heritage, I'm not one to turn down any opportunity to indulge in any good old fashioned American excess and indulgence. How about yourself, Jake? How was the turkey day for you?
Whew, man, I did it up. Normally, I'm down in Tampa Bay celebrating it with family, and I've got a few different families. So normally, growing up, holidays were sort of stressful. You know, you would start off with, your mom's side, then go to your stepdad's side, and you've got to please all of the people, and you've got to be here at 2 p.m. for lunch and at the next place at 5:30 for dinner, and you're not even really hungry for the second course, but eat just so you don't offend them, and they just lots of driving, lots of stress. Luckily this Thanksgiving I am currently in graduate school. For those of you, I don't really. I try to talk about myself as little as often, but you know what? It's a slow news day, and Thanksgiving was just a couple days ago. So I'll crack the book open a little bit more. I'm going to grad school, and finals are these next 2 weeks. And it's tough. It's a lot of work. So, studying law, all that fun stuff. So I've been stuck here, just studying and getting ready for finals. So this is the first Thanksgiving in a while I've done alone. when I lived in Colorado, even though I didn't travel back to Florida to see family. One Thanksgiving, actually, my beautiful, lovely, charming mother came, and we had a Thanksgiving. And the other time, I had roommates, buddies from Florida, who had moved to Denver as well. So usually it's a group effort. This was my first solo Thanksgiving in a long time, if ever. So I indulged maybe a little too much. I woke up, made a big ass omelet, and over the course of the morning I popped a bottle of champagne, and I was just going ham on mimosas. Finished the bottle, had a few beers. My mom, the last time she came up and visited, she made some meatloaf, threw it in the freezer. I defrosted that, ate that and some potatoes for lunch, and I passed out. I passed out for a good clip, and I woke back up as the last football game was wrapping up in a stupor. It was a very good Thanksgiving. But I hope you listening, whether you did it with family or did it alone like me, you had a good one. And hopefully you weren't left late Saturday night or late Thursday night / Friday morning hungover as shit from all of the terrible food and terrible drinking. Not that the food tasted bad, but that, it's typically your Thanksgiving fare isn't salad and tofu. I hope you ate some food that was artery clogging. It was a good time. But let's get to the MMA. This past Saturday, we had the TUF Latin America 2 finale, a fight that originally was going to have Matt Brown and Kelvin Gastelum. However, earlier this month, Brown had to withdraw from the fight with an ankle injury, replaced by the recently very hot Neil Magny. Other than that, we had a Lamas-Sanchez fight, Cejudo versus Jussier Formiga. No really other fights of note. A few familiar faces. Andre Fili won, Eric Perez won, Efrain Escudero lost. Lots of decisions. The final 8 fights, including the 3 of note, all went to decisions. Henry Cejudo, that was a split over Jussier Formiga, a fight that I think most people ruled a 30-27. It was a pretty one-sided fight. I don't know who the judge that gave it to Formiga was, but maybe that person shouldn't be judging fights. Ricardo Lamas with a very one-sided decision over Diego Sanchez, and like I sort of posed last week, Diego's probably going to lose, and that means, looking back in his last fights, the guy is now, let's scroll down here. In his last 7 fights, he's 3-4, and all 3 of those losses were bullshit decisions. So, if we're being honest with ourselves, Diego Sanchez should be 0-7 in his last 7 fights. That's not a good sign. The guy, probable UFC Hall of Famer, I want to say, won the first TUF. He's been in a lot of UFC fights. He is only 33, but the guy, he has 23 UFC fights under his belt. If you're over 20, that's a pretty impressive milestone. Sanchez, I would like to see him maybe get fed a bum in his next fight with, no gas tank or no chin that Diego can just finish. But if you're gonna put him up against guys who can bang like Lamas, he's going to lose. I guess I'll save the main event for its own thing, because that's a pretty interesting topic. Magny wins the split decision. A lot of people disagreed with that. So aside from the main event, Pat, were you able to watch the card? And if so, what did you think of the fights?
Oh yeah, I was able to catch this card. It was it was a tough Latin America 2 finale card.
It was 4 hours
It
long. It was a long
it
event to watch.
Holy shit. Yeah, it was long just because we've pretty much beat the UFC's pacing is garbage drum to death. But it really is, especially when you have so many fights that go to decision. You can't rattle off 1.5 million commercials and hype packages for events that aren't even happening that day. They're running off hype packages for the fucking Aldo McGregor fight like it's going out of style. I mean, I understand that is a big event. You got to hype that up. That's the next pay-per-view. But please, for the love of God, this card ran so long and was fairly thoroughly unentertaining with the exception of a few different points.
And that
And
brings up the question too, like yes, I understand you're going to run one or two ads for UFC 194. I think we saw maybe a dozen ads for UFC 194. And what demographic are you really appealing to? Are you appealing to the people who are watching TUF Latin America 2 finale and weren't planning on you watching UFC 194? I mean, I don't think those people exist.
it's a very narrow demographic there. Yeah, hard to believe that that's who they're campaigning for. Really, advertising dollars better spent elsewhere. It was just kind of puzzling, as well as, and I must say this, Ben Folks, not necessarily a guy I normally agree with. I mean, I'm not going to badmouth the guy whatsoever, but at least not right now. He wrote an article, must have read my mind or something like that. Must have just tapped in, pulled an Inception type of deal. And he wrote an article, I believe it was posted on MMAJunkie.com, along the lines of why are the Ultimate Fighter finale fights still being put on the main card? And I think that is just a fantastic point. Again, essentially just scanning me, just reading my thoughts there. It makes no sense. I mean, really, the tough Latin America to um, those those fights. I mean, my goodness, these are fighters that would not be in the UFC if they didn't have a roster that was like 500 fighters. It's pretty much unanimously agreed upon that the UFC has a lot of talent in there these days that they never would if it weren't for the Fox deal and the extended number of events that they have these days. Not that I'm against that. I love the events. I love all that good stuff. But these guys, they could do just as well being on the Fox Sports 1 televised prelims. It's on the same network. You got the same exposure. And hey, you know what? That's even a headline to bring people in for the prelims. You know, they want featured prelims. Every now and then we see fights that are put on prelim cards that you're like, man, you know, that should be on the main card over this fight. But they need a card to package on the prelims to get the prelim viewership up. So, hey, guess what? Why don't you use that tough marketing angle? And that's a good thing, or at least split it up. Do 1 and 1, one on the prelims, one on the main card. But they got to do something about that. Um, there were entertaining moments. There were some solid fights. Andre Fili, as you mentioned, he got a really great TKO win. But one of the other talking points, Jake, I want to know how you feel about this. The Scott Jorgensen fight, he was so clearly beat up in that fight. He had his leg destroyed. And apparently, Scott Jorgensen, I got much love for Young Guns. He had tweeted out that in between rounds, he had asked his doctor, or he had asked the referee and his corner not to stop the fight. Well, that's why there is a referee there and why there's a doctor there in the first place. You need the doctor and the referee both need to make that fight autonomous of what the fighter wants. That's the literal reason why they're there and why they're being paid. And in the very early going of the second round of that fight, when it should have been stopped, the referee asks Scott Jorgensen, do you want the fight to be stopped? If you're asking the fighter, you should probably be stepping in at that point anyways. When he's limping away, barely able to stand up on 2 feet, trying to dodge a furious combo of punches that's coming at him almost defenselessly. I mean, he's very lucky not to have incurred some serious career-threatening damage. From what I understand, um, it wasn't anything, ligament tears or anything like that. I could have sworn I heard it was maybe just a sprained ankle. I would have to follow up on that, but it very easily could have gone quite wrong. And I don't know. I thought it was a travesty by the referee that he let it go on as long as it did. Do you have any feelings on that one, Jake?
Yeah, before I put in my own 2 cents, I did actually want to bring this up, so I'm glad you mentioned something. Jorgensen put out a tweet saying, quote, "For the reporters out there, check. The rules corners cannot stop a fight as told to us by the commission, and if they had, I'd be pissed. I didn't lose my leg, and I'm quite alright minus not being able to fight. I tapped when it was too much. Remember, you're the same people praying for knockouts, which is simply put brain trauma. Get a grip. You can't have it both ways. This is a sport. We know the risks when we crawl in there to lay it on the line," saying that it should be his call, not anyone else's. I disagree with that, as does one of the guys I really look to and really hold his opinion in high regard, Big John McCarthy. Big John weighed in on it recently on here. Let me get the source because I don't want to quote this without saying where he said it. Big John, where did he say it? All right, MMAfighting.com is where the story is, and they didn't make it easy enough to find a source. But McCarthy said to somebody, take him over to a ringside physician and say, "I want you to tell me that his foot is okay for him to continue on in this fight in a fashion that he's not going to bring injury to himself." And if the ringside physician is going to say, no, he's got a problem because his foot is flopping, they're not going to be able to say exactly what it is. But if they move his foot, Scott's going to go, ugh, and guess what's going to happen? The fight is going to stop. This is not life or death. For some fans it is, and they look at it like, oh, if he wants to go on, let him go on. No, you do not let him continue on, because if he can't fight at a level that he's normally capable of in protecting himself, you can't do that. The fight's going to end up getting called, but I'm not going to go, but I'm going to go through a procedure. I'm not just going to sit there and take the fight away. I agree with Big John. There's a reason we have refs in there, and that's, fighters are not always in the mind frame where they need to be as far as self-preservation. If in football now you have doctors on the sideline, they're looking at players who get a concussion, because of course a player is going to send himself back in there. Of course a fighter is not going to call off his own fight and lose unless it's life or death. And John makes a really good point. If you're at a level that you're not, if you're not fighting at a level you're normally capable of in protecting yourself, what if you get knocked out hard and you get a really bad concussion from the knockout? Well, maybe a ref should have stopped it beforehand. So I agree with Big John here, not necessarily Scotty, as far as stoppages and who should have the final say. Should it be anyone other than the fighters? I agree with Big John.
Yeah, I do 1,000,000% as well. I mean, God bless Scott Jorgensen. Again, I love the guy. I've been watching him since the WEC days for sure, since way back. But that is, if as far as liberty is concerned, you know what? Hey, I'm one of those guys. You do whatever you want 100% of the time. Yeah, what you do is your opinion, or that's your prerogative. But when it comes to combat sports, this is a licensed and regulated organization here. You need to fall within certain regulations in order to compete. And part of that is being beholden to the referees and doctors' discretion. And I believe that they should use that discretion a little more. And yeah, Scott Jorgensen is right. We are the same people that always want to watch knockouts. I am going to bag on this card because it went to decision, tons of decision. And not just that it was decisions, but that they weren't entirely exciting overall. But we want to see knockouts, not because some guy had the shit kicked out of his leg and couldn't walk, and the fight really should have been stopped because he was fucking stumbling all over himself because he could barely walk, leaving himself completely exposed to almost anything that his opponent wanted to do to him. The fight should probably be called off at that point before your opponent is allowed to knock you completely unconscious with strikes, which he probably was very likely on his way to doing. I would like to see somebody get knocked out by the merit of their own actions when both guys are, of course, nobody is in the fight 100%, as the saying goes, but if both guys are healthy enough to get into the ring and the fight is on, I want to see these guys get the knockout by the merit of their striking technique or whatever it is, not the fact that we had one guy who was crippled up so bad and didn't know when to throw in the towel, and so he let pride get the best of him, and none of the doctors or refs or cornermen would do anything. So, he just got knocked out after an injury. I don't think that's the way it should play out. And, it's not good for the longevity of the fighters in the sport either. Just my opinion.
You got hot takes coming from P Money.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Speaking of hot takes, the final decision, it was hot. I saw a lot of scorecards going toward Magny. I saw a few toward Gastelum. Myself, in most scorecards I saw, had it 47-47 a draw. I think the first round and the second round were unquestionable 10-9s for Neil Magny. The third round, depending on how you score it, most gave it a 10-9 Magny. You could score it a 10-10. You could even score it a 10-9 Gastelum. I wouldn't say if you scored the first or second round toward Kelvin, I got some questions for you. But the third round, it went back and forth. I wouldn't really blame you for that. The fourth round was all Gastelum. That's either a 10-9 or, as I scored it, a 10-8 toward Kelvin. And the fifth round was a 10-9 Gastelum easy. So the only round that was close was the third round. Every other round had a divisive winner, and in the fourth round, I thought Kelvin was so divisive that you had to give it a 10-8. I scored it a 47-47. I thought it was, usually when you get a draw, it's, you're going to have a lot of varying scorecards, but I thought this was one of the easier draws I've ever seen. The judges didn't see it the same way. Two of them scored it toward Neil Magny, one toward Kelvin Gastelum. Neil Magny is your winner. Like I said on last week's show, it would make sense if you gave Magny, the guy who beat Gastelum in Woodley, and if Gastelum wins, you give him the guy who beat Magny and Damian Maia. Magny versus Woodley would be a really good fight. Magny was very impressive in those first three rounds using his length. And, I couldn't have called this more wrong. I said if Magny wins, it's going to be him wearing out Kelvin's gas tank, and the exact opposite went down. Gastelum won the last two rounds. So I didn't really call this correctly, but Magny was very impressive using his strength and his length to strength and length to win those first three rounds, which ultimately ended up getting him the victory. What did you think of the fight, and how did you score it, Sweet Pappy Jones?
Big Jake, strength and length was tentatively the name of our radio morning duo that we were going to launch, but we decided to go a different direction with that.
And length.
Yeah, fuck yeah, you will. Man, this Gastelum Magny, it was a good fight. It had the back and forth, had the drama there. And I think you were dead on, especially picking Tyron Woodley before the fight even happened. Tyron Woodley to fight Neil Magny if he were to win the fight. And now that he did win the fight, it's super interesting because Magny looked better in the first 3 rounds than Tyron Woodley, just my opinion, than Tyron Woodley did in his fight with Kelvin Gastelum. If I recall correctly, that was a split decision as well. And Woodley definitely deserved to get that one, but I think Magny was a lot more emphatic in his first 3 rounds against Gastelum than even Woodley was against Gastelum. Of course, Woodley's always a beast and is a huge threat to Neil Magny, and I'd love to see that fight. But yeah, as far as this one goes, it's super hard to score. I mean, this is one of those ones, at least for me, totally depends on how you choose to interpret the judging criteria. Again, that 3rd round, I don't even know. That could be 10-9 either way. It could be 10-10. The 4th round, I mean, yeah, lots of people calling for the 10-8. I mean, any round where somebody gets dropped twice, I'm pretty inclined to call that a 10-8 myself in almost any situation. This one, though, just when I was watching it, Magny was really in the fight. I mean, he was dropped, but to me, it didn't even look like he was really stunned at all. Just, clipped, lost his balance, but, looked like he never even lost eye contact on Kelvin Gastelum. He always seemed right there in the fight, and it wasn't a complete blowout. It wasn't one of those ones where I was like, oh, man, I don't recall Magny even being dropped twice being one of those ones where I was like, oh, he's seconds away from being finished. I mean, even when he got dropped, you could kind of tell, at least for me, I felt like he had that cognizance still about him. So really tough to score that 4th round for me. I mean, again, I've 99 out of 100 times I want to give a 10-8 round to the guy who dropped the other guy twice, and 99 times out of 100 you probably should. But man, Magny, he was hanging in there the whole fight. He made it a fight, and that's why he ultimately got the W, I suppose. It was a very closely contested bout, at least after the 3rd round. 1st and 2nd round, definitely for Magny. You can't argue that. But it was a very contentious bout, a good bout, and there's still some good things to see from both these guys. It'll be interesting to see where Gastelum goes, if he goes back to 185, if he continues to hang around at 170. I mean, he seemed to have the gas tank. Again, he did better in the 4th and 5th rounds than he did the entire fight, so that kind of says something about him and his performance at 170. Maybe he's got the diet going, maybe he's got the cardio going, and he's ready to make a run at 170 pounds. He just needs to change some things up, but I thought it was a solid main event and definitely a good showing by Neil Magny, one of the most prolific fighters in the UFC, and a good win for the underdog in this one. I believe he closed at like plus 280.
Yeah, the first opponent was going to be Matt Brown. I think Matt Brown even was a slight underdog against Kelvin, if I remember correctly. But Kelvin takes a hard loss. But I mean, I've said it a million times. You can go back and listen to the podcasts we were doing during TUF 17. I was saying from episode 1 or 2 of that season that Kelvin was going to win it all. I was the only person in the world taking Kelvin Gastelum over Uriah Hall in the finals. There's something about his game. It's the fundamentals are all there. The work ethic is there. And I really think, especially if you look at how old Kelvin is compared to the rest of the division, I think in Kelvin we're looking at, this is a very similar spot that Rory was in 4 or 5 years ago. The young guy still learning. He's going to take a few rough losses, but he is going to rally back, and I think, like Rory, eventually earn UFC gold. Let's move on, I guess, now that we've finished up with that TUF card, we have a few bits of news to get to, so let's do it. Let's get to the news. News theme. The news there. Oh, man, there. I don't know if it's just the build up to UFC 194 and everyone collectively holding their breaths that card doesn't fall out with injury. We did see one, thank God it wasn't a major one, but it was Michelle Watterson, the karate hottie, dropping out of the fight against Tisha Torres. She's going to be replaced by, I forget which one, but one of the Lieberger twins. I think there are these women's MMA twins. One was like RFA champ, Jocelyn maybe. So it'll be Torres, who will likely be a big favorite against Jocelyn Lieberger. What else? Oh, I did, speaking of UFC 194, I did want to mention a really good piece by Sean Al-Shadi on MMA Fighting, I believe is the website it's posted on. And it's called, like, We All Faced Aldo. Here, I'll look up the name of it because I don't want to fuck that up. The Night We Faced Aldo is the name of it. It was posted yesterday on MMAfighting.com by Sean, Shaun, Al-Shadi, Al-Shatti, and it's really good. They talk to all of Aldo's past opponents, talk about the night they fought the current champ, and it really does a good job painting the picture of brilliance that Jose's current run at featherweight has been. The guy's been an absolute monster. So go read that. What else? Go call your mom and tell her you love her, because there's not much news going on in MMA. Just a couple fight announcements, though, before we get to UFC South Korea and talk about that. I did want to get our friend Alan on, our boy Alan at Westland Eagle AH. He's been the co-host with me here a few times. He's actually currently in South Korea. We're going to try and get him on maybe next week or the week after. I know he's probably going to be pretty busy with work when he gets back to the States because he spent almost 2 weeks in South Korea. But he's there now. I think he just recently sent me a picture of him walking to the arena. The prelims start in 2 hours. So I'm sure that's been a really cool experience for him. I think he trained a little bit with Korea Top Team, and he's huge fans of all the South Korean fighters. So he's over there having a blast. Apparently it snowed there yesterday. Looked like a fun trip, but before we get to that UFC South Korea card, Barnett Rothwell, one of the fight announcements set for UFC on Fox 18 in Newark. That's going to be January's Fox card in New Jersey on January 30th. This is an interesting fight. I don't know, like one guy doesn't really particularly stand out. These are both guys who are pretty well-rounded, both good ground fighters. I guess Josh would have a slight advantage on the ground, maybe Ben standing up. Rothwell, I don't know whether to classify him as new guard or old guard because he's been around a while, going back to the IFL days. So I don't want to call him part of the new guard. But as far as fighters who have stepped it up and really made a name for themselves recently, Ben joined the UFC back in 2009 and couldn't string together 2 straight wins at all. Now he's on a 3-fight winning streak, wins over Brandon Vera, Alistair Overeem, Matt Mitrione. It looks like he's maybe doing more than he did when he originally joined the UFC. I'm looking to I'm not sure what fight camp he's fighting out of from Wisconsin. It says Rothwell MMA, so I guess he's got his own camp. Josh Barnett, just man, it's really strange with Josh. Times he looks like a world beater and a guy who would easily win the championship, and other times he looks like an absolute bum. Beat Frank Mir with a knee, lost to Travis Brown via KO, and then didn't fight for almost 2 years. Came back, beat Roy Nelson in a unanimous decision, so Ben Rothwell will be an interesting test. I really don't know which way to go. I guess I'll be rooting for Ben Rothwell for no other reason than the awesome promos that he cuts whenever he wins. But I wouldn't be shocked either way as far as who wins this fight.
Nor would I, Jake. Really, I think at this time, Ben Rothwell, I mean, this was a guy that was a tomato can being crushed by Cain Velasquez, and he's come back with some really improbable wins as of late. I mean, knocking out Alistair Overeem. He's just reinvented himself, and he attributes it a lot to his confidence, his state of mind. Looks like his overall game is really coming together late on in life. As you mentioned, this was a guy who was fighting in the IFL back in 06 or 07, whenever the heck that was going on. And now here he is, 2015 going on 2016, and he's looking to be a contender in the UFC heavyweight division, which back in 09 when he first came in, he certainly did not look like he was anywhere. I mean, even 2-3 years ago, he didn't look like he was anywhere near that level, but he's certainly getting there. And Josh Barnett, former UFC heavyweight champion himself, as you mentioned, he's always kind of been Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde. Which is the guy that's going to show up? Is it going to be the underwhelming Josh Barnett, or is it going to be the dynamic catch wrestler Josh Barnett that's put on some great wars? And he had a good showing against Roy Nelson in his last fight, hopefully being able to stay somewhat active. That was just back in September. So here we go, just a little over 2 months after the fact, he's getting his fight against Ben Rothwell. So I'm hoping that activity will bode well for Josh Barnett. For some reason, even though I tend to not side with guys who have pissed hot in the past, for some reason I find myself siding with Josh Barnett. Maybe it's the fact that he references Immortal, the Norwegian black metal band, or just the fact that he's a metalhead in general, but I tend to enjoy the guy. He's been cutting some decent promos for a while himself as well. And, I mean, all respect to Ben Rothwell. I like seeing him develop himself as a marketable personality and develop himself as a fighter and get in there and do good and win some fights. I find myself pulling towards Barnett, but I actually feel like Rothwell, just with his momentum, really, I think this is his fight to lose, actually. I would not be surprised no matter how this fight turns out.
Yeah, we'll see how it turns out fairly shortly, in just about 2 months. Another fight that looks like it is on the horizon for UFC, what will that be? UFC 195 in Brazil. A rematch between Anderson Silva and Vitor Belfort. What do you make of this fight? I mean, this is a fight that, just a few years ago when it happened the first time, I guess back in 2011, both of these guys were on top of their game and have sort of recently fallen off. Belfort, he had that 3-fight win streak where he was TRT'd to the gills, KO'd Bisping, Rockhold, Hendo, and I think we all sort of accept that was the TRT. Then Chris Weidman finishes him in the first round. Then he finishes a 76-year-old Dan Henderson earlier this month in Brazil. Where Vitor is, there's a big chasm where his current skill set could lie. I don't think he really needed to do that much to defeat Hendo, especially considering the fight was in Brazil. Silva's sort of in the same way. We don't know what his level is. We don't know how good he currently is. You know, both of them have gotten older. Belfort is 38. Anderson is 40 now. Jesus. Silva, you know, he lost those 2 fights to Weidman, and even then, both of them were such weird losses. You know, he loses the first one clowning him. He loses the second one breaking his leg on Weidman's leg. Then the Nick Diaz fight, it's somehow a boring decision. Yeah, he outworks Diaz, but he was on drostanolone and Andro. Diaz also tests positive for marijuana metabolites. So we really don't know where either of these guys are. One of them could, you know, both of them could be bums. Both of them could be world beaters. But this will separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, because I think the winner of this fight will have the opportunity to make one last title run, whereas the loser of this fight is going to be in a real bad spot. If Anderson loses, that means that in his last 4 fights, he technically doesn't have a win, with the Nick Diaz fight being overturned. If Belfort loses the fight, then, you know, he loses his second out of 2 big tests since coming off TRT. The fight will be in Brazil, though, so I'm not sure to what extent he'll be allowed to be on the gimmick. That being said, I'm still gonna go with Anderson. You know, just take how bad Silva just destroyed him in 2011. Extrapolate that to 2015. I still think it's the Spiders fight to lose. If I'm setting the odds and I'm Vegas, I'd put Silva like minus 200 maybe. But yeah, I think it's Silva's fight there. What do you think?
Spot on, Jake. That is what I think. I'd put those lines right around the same myself. I mean, Anderson Silva, as you mentioned, he's still got that air of that dude whose ass he just can't beat. That Diaz fight, that was just a circus show. Who knows what the hell that was all about. The Weidman fight, as you mentioned, again, those do have that flukish kind of aura to them as well. Of course, I'll defend Weidman as having legitimately beat him both times. I mean, of course, I'm sure everybody does, but still just the fashion was just quite odd. And I must say, that first fight, sweet holy Lord, I was crying fix that weekend. They had Weidman with the American flag and the Bruce Springsteen queued up and ready to go. And Anderson Silva just, yeah, you know, actually, now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, God damn, that was just some shifty shit. They're like, oh, yeah, Anderson Silva.
The fight was a work, people.
I mean, he always did that with his opponents. He hadn't really been doing that in his last couple fights. Not at middleweight, not for the championship. Not that I recall. I mean, it was just such a crazy level of showboating there. But
it's funny you say that, because literally, like, 3 days ago, I was on Skype passing the time with my buddy Ross Finkelstein, the Jew, and we rewatched Silva versus Bonner. And goddamn, that was such an embarrassment. I mean, Silva just back against the fence, toying with him, and then just finishes him at will. That was a fun fight.
yeah, no, actually, as I was talking about that, I was thinking of that example. He was, when he was backing himself up against the cage and then just parrying left and right and pretty much dodging everything Bonner threw, and then that was completely embarrassing. I mean, he was definitely doing that at 205. I just, the Yushin Okami fight, I really don't recall seeing him doing a lot of that against Yushin. But anyways, I'm going down a whole different path. Any way you look at it, this is a fight. You think Anderson Silva has to win this one. Vitor has not looked as impressive since the non-TRT Vitor has shown up. And I think that Anderson Silva will be able to come back and pretty much just do to him what he did the first time. He'll catch him with something long and something hard, and he'll be able to put him down. And that's at least I hope that's how it works out. I mean, of course, I like Vitor. You can't I don't know. You can't hate on the TRT monster. He puts on a good show. I'm hoping somebody gets knocked out the first. It'll be really interesting to see any other outcome than that. I'm pretty sure that's how we're all banking that this is going to go down one way or the other. Somebody's getting TKO'd in this one. At least hopefully. It certainly doesn't have that same luster that it used to now that both these guys have been popping and both on not the best streaks in their career, definitely in the twilight. They've both been in the game for so long. But it's going to be good to see them run this back. You can bet that this is one Vitor wants to do again, and I can't wait to see how this is going to play out. And as you mentioned, Jake, are they going to get the thorough drug testing that they should down in Brazil? Let's see how that plays out as well.
Yeah, you regulated to the gills, but when it gets outside the states, there can be lots of instances of funny business. Speaking of funny business, we're getting to this UFC South Korea card. We'll start breaking it down. The prelims, you got a fight between Tae-Hyung Bang and Leo Kuntz. And before we break this card down, I think this is an interesting topic to start with. Not only has this fight gotten unwarranted popularity just because of the name of it, you have Tae-Hyung Bang versus Leo Kuntz, or the UFC puts out these graphics for every fight. For the main event, it's Benson Henderson versus Jorge Masvidal. So the graphic says Henderson, Masvidal, or Kim Waters. The graphic for this prelim fight is Bang Kuntz. So there's already been a ton of jokes about the Bang Kuntz fight. Bang Kuntz, Bang Kuntz, Bang Kuntz. And now we have some of the strangest pre-fight betting movement we've ever seen here. I don't really follow the whole betting scene that closely, but one guy who does, he's a very worthwhile follow on Twitter at Fury's Fight Picks, and I also like his podcast, the MMA Oddscast. Luca Fury, he I think was one of the first people to pick up on very strange movement between Tae-Hyung Bang and Leo Kuntz. It's not weird to see movement on a fight, steady movement, even morning of. But for a fight to go from for a favorite to go from a 2-1 favorite to a 6-1 underdog is completely unfounded. Luca Fury saying, this is the craziest line movement I've seen in my entire life. I'm looking at some of his tweets now. Even if this was a super high-profile title fight, the line flip would be bizarre. But a 5 a.m. fight in Korea between relative unknowns, fishy. Just got a statement from Bookmaker Sportsbook. They tell me there are, quote, rumors of a fix, and their, quote, lines are being attacked. I'm trying to find some more tweets. Yeah, Leo Kuntz now up to minus 650. This is the biggest line flip I've ever seen in MMA history. What the hell is going on? Of course, our buddy Ramses had a few tweets as well saying, "Ha, someone ratted about bang cunts being fixed, betting line pulled, and they called me a conspiracy theorist. Every sport, corruption." So the clip I played before,
The fight was a work, people.
it's man, maybe Ramses has been a little more wise than I gave him credit for, but some seemingly fishy stuff going on. Pat, you have any thoughts on it before we actually get into the meat of this card, which I guess there's not much?
Well stated, Jake. Really, I just hope that this isn't an indication of a fix or a rumored work or anything like that going down. I would hope that, I mean, some people like to offer their betting advice in a consulting manner. Luca Fury and the guys over at the MMA Oddscast, I'm a fan of theirs as well. Big shouts out. They have a subscription-based service, and they also give away free picks, and they put people on, this is our pick. This is, if you want to make money, check us out. And, we'll give you the picks, blah, blah, blah. And maybe this is one of those things where, hey, there was a hot consulting tip coming on. I mean, of course, people are in Vegas right now. So people are always looking for ways to make money. Somewhere in Vegas, somebody is drunk or cracked out or something like that, and they're trying to find a big come up. And, hey, guess what? There's some random-ass UFC fight in South Korea coming on at 4 a.m. or whenever the hell it is. And there's an opportunity for somebody to make chip. People are going to find that chip. So I'm hoping it'll be more with the consulting thing. Somebody gets a hot tip. Because every now and then, I mean, and especially with MMA, we know that Vegas has been known, again, an underdog or two. I mean, Neil Magny, again, the main eventer, of last weekend's card, he was plus 280, and he ended up coming through winning that fight. I mean, your boy P Money, I'm pretty sure I was calling that fight a little closer than that, even siding towards Magny a little bit. So we know that the bookmakers aren't always correct in their lines, and it could just be that somebody sniffed out something good and the word got out and said, hey, you know what? This guy's way better than the other guy. This guy's going to get blown out of the water. And that's where all this late money came from. And I hope that's the instance as opposed to the rumor of a fix or a work getting out. And, of course, the magnifying glass definitely is going to be on this fight in just a couple hours now. It's going to be really interesting to see how that fight goes down.
Yeah, our boy Ramsey's tweeting at us, if you only knew the power of the dark side. Man, I did put a little bit of money on Leo Kuntz when I saw the line shift this dramatically. And if we see Tae-Hyung Bang, which I might stay up for this fight, man, it's going to be in about 3 hours. I might stay up, I might not. But if Tae-Hyung Bang turtles up and gets TKO'd in the first round, it's gonna be very interesting. Let's break the card down. Like I said, this card has about as much meat as a cheese pizza. A lot of fights between relative unknowns. You got two Dong-Hyun Kims fighting. Maestro Dong-Hyun Kim, the lesser known one, is fighting Dominique Steele on UFC Fight Pass. Are the whole cards actually on UFC Fight Pass. And the one we know, both of them are welterweights. The one we're more familiar with is fighting Dominic Waters. So one's fighting Dominique and the other one's fighting Dominic. We got Du Ho Choi against Sam Cecilia. That should be an interesting fight. We have Sexy Yama coming back to fight Alberto Mina. I don't feel like Sexy Yama has been fighting often at all. Yeah, since losing to Jake Shields, which finished a 4-fight losing streak for him. So he lost to Jake Shields back at UFC 144, which that was the Edgar versus Henderson. That was that the first one? Yeah, I think it was the first Yeah, this is the first Edgar versus Bendo fight. So this was
God damn, that was a long time
ass
ago.
time ago. This is when Frankie lost his lightweight belt. Long ass time ago. Frankie has fought 6 times since. Akiyama was on the same card and has fought once since, defeating a now retired Amir Sadola back in 2014, over a year ago. So he fought at UFC 144 in Japan. He fought at UFC Fight Night in Japan, and now he's fighting in Korea. So he hasn't fought. Man, the last time he fought outside of Asia was the Evans or Ortiz card back in 2011. Jesus, UFC 133. A fight where he co-mained and lost via KO to a guy we were just talking about, Vitor Belfort. So yeah, seeing a rare appearance from Sexyama. Other notable names: the Korean Superboy, who might be the next big thing out of South Korea. So Ham, who's one of the more she just lost to JoJo Calderwood, but one of the better fighters at women's strawweight. Who else? Dong-Hyun. Like I said, Dong-Hyun Kim. Let's save the main event. I think the main event is really the only fight worth breaking down on its own. But actually, it should be a fun card. A lot of close lines. It isn't one of these cards where you have a ton of fights where the line is crazy. Really, the only fights I'm seeing that should be gimme fights are the more well-known Dong-Hyun Kim. He's easily the biggest favorite on the card, minus 750 over Dominic Waters. Bendo's minus 220 over Jorge Masvidal. Duho Choi is minus 230 against Sam Cecilia. And the strange fight between Leo Kuntz and Taehyung Bang. Kuntz is now minus 380. I'm glad I was able to slip a bet in at minus 145 when the line was rapidly shifting. But aside from those 4 fights, every single fight is in the 100s as far as odds go, which means it's anyone's fight. So it should at least be fun to watch for MMA junkies like myself and Pat, and I'm sure a lot of listeners, just because you don't really know who is going to win. Any thoughts on any of the fights or competitors, any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. As I look at this card, it should be a decent one. I do like a lot of these prospects that we have out here. I know our boy Wesleyan Eagle, old Allen, he's a fan of Dong-Yi the Ox Yang. I like what he does. He's a good scrapper. Love the style he comes with.
He's a fan of all Korean fighters.
Oh yeah, he's a huge mark for all the Korean top team guys and all the fighters over there. Yu Choi Nam, I like him versus Mike De La Torre. That should be a nice little scrap there. Both of them had some decent streaks going on before their most recent fights. Well, actually, at least Nam had a decent streak before his loss to Felipe Nover. As you mentioned, Seo Ham, decent 115-pound prospect there. Nice to have some international flavor to the women's strawweight division, which it really is a nice collection of women from all over. Definitely good to see it get diversified a little bit more. And yeah, I think it is a decent card. I'm probably a little more interested in this one than I was the TUF Latin America 2 card, just because I feel like that region has definitely had a lot more exposure, and I mean, that's where we've been getting all of our prospects from Latin America, the Brazilian fighters. Every now and then you'll have somebody coming in from maybe a Portugal or maybe some other different country in South America. I'm completely drawing a blank there. I was trying to think of Nazareno Malagari's country. I want to say we've had a few different fighters from there, but Definitely we've cast that net a few times through Latin American waters, and the Asian market, we really haven't tapped into as much. It's been getting a little bit more exposure, especially with some of the events on Fight Pass. So I'm definitely looking forward to see how a lot of these fighters perform on the Fight Pass card coming up here.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be watching it live, but I'll certainly try and make an effort to double back and catch it after the fact. Because I criticize the UFC on a lot of things, the Reebok deal, the transparency, the just paying fighters in general, what they charge for pay-per-views, the length of a lot of cards, the pacing. I'll stick it to them when I feel like they're fucking up. But one thing that they've nailed is UFC Fight Pass. I will gladly pay $10 a month. The Fight Light library on there is huge. Really good quality. One really cool thing you can do is listen to the audio from the corners. It's a damn quality service. I was a little skeptical when it first came out, but it's damn quality. If only they would throw the pay-per-views on Fight Pass like Vince does. That would be the ultimate. But maybe one day down the road. Let's get to the main event. We have Benson Henderson, who it looked like he was going to have a very busy 2015. He lost to Donald Cerrone in January. Less than a month later, takes a fight on short notice against Brandon Thatch at welterweight. Moves up, defeats Thatch, fourth round submission. Then things slowed down a little bit. He beat Thatch, then was supposed to fight between. Or I think he was going to fight Michael Johnson in July, and the fight got canceled. I don't know what exactly happened there. I forget if there was an injury or what, but now Ben hasn't fought since that win against Thatch. Said he wanted to come back and fight in South Korea, being half Korean. I think his mom is from South Korea. Was going to fight Thiago Alves. Alves got pulled 2 weeks before the card and was replaced by Jorge Masvidal, who is a guy who is quite underrated. You look at his last, I guess, 9 fights since losing to Gilbert Melendez for the championship in Strikeforce. 9 fights, he's only lost 2 of them. One of them was to Rustam Khabilov, who is one of these Russians who just has insane technique and insane strength. And it's difficult to beat him, whether it's Rustam, whether it's Nurmagomedov. They're difficult wins. His only other loss in that span since 2011, a controversial loss to Ally Quinta, a loss I think most people gave Masvidal. So really, you're kind of looking at 9 fights. The only legit loss was against Khabilov, and even there, it was not a one-sided fight. It was a very close fight. That one fight of the night. So, I don't expect Bendo to get away with this one easy. I still think he'll win. Because Bendo, not to employ MMA math here, even though it's exactly what I'm doing. The only guy to legitimately beat Masvidal in Rustam Khabilov, Bendo beat with relative ease a rear naked choke in the 4th round last summer, which earned him Performance of the Night. I still expect Bendo to win, but also expect Jorge to have his moments. All in all, though, I think he'll wear Jorge down. I don't know if he'll get the finish like he's gotten in his last 2 wins, both of them 4th round rear naked chokes. I'm sure he'll try and continue that streak of finishes, but my pick here is Bendo winning a maybe 3-2 unanimous decision, 4-1 maybe. I think he wins a decision, but Jorge will steal a round or two against him.
Jake, I think Jorge has the ability to do more than just steal a round from Benson Henderson.
Oh, shit.
If I recall correctly, Benson's fight with Magomedov, he was not handling that fight well at all. In fact, from what I recall, he was getting butt fucked throughout that entire fight. Habilov, pardon me, Magomedov, thinking of the welterweight division now.
What?
That was his fight at 155, and no, he was getting destroyed in that fight. He was getting grapple fucked and beat the fuck up rather badly, if I recall, until he was, to my recollection, just able to snatch up this Hail Mary rear naked choke out of nowhere. I had Habilov absolutely dominating that fight, with Benson having no way to win that fight except for a finish. And Masvidal, as you mentioned, he's been on a very good pace recently, and he has what it takes. He's got the cardio, he's got the length. He'll be bigger than Benson Henderson. He's a crafty guy on the ground himself. I really think this is a fantastic matchup, and Masvidal, I'd say he might even have a little bit more pop. We just saw Masvidal knock out Mutanch in his last fight back in July, and man, Benson Henderson moving up from 155 pounds, he might not like the old sting that Masvidal is able to provide there. So I can't wait for this fight. I'm rooting for Masvidal in this one, if I'm being honest. I like Gamebred. I like the style of fight he brings, and more of a boxer for sure. I think he's got some good skills. Of course, Benson Henderson. What can you say? Former 155-pound champ. Definitely one of the best in MMA today at 155 pounds, and really at any weight class. Just a model of how an MMA fighter should be. He's good everywhere. He's very proficient in all levels of the game. Solid hands, solid striking, good leg kicks, good grappling. As we saw, he was able to get the rear naked choke against Habilov in a fight he was getting completely out-grappled and beaten in. So he's a crafty guy, former champion for a reason. Going to be great, but I'm thinking this is going to be another main event upset, Jake. I'm thinking Masvidal is going to come through big in underdog fashion and get a win in Korea and upset old Benson.
Folks, you heard it here first. P-Money is predicting the upset, going with Jorge Masvidal over Bendo. I'm going with the safe pick of Bendo via unanimous decision. And I think that does it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Other podcasts you got to check out, of course, our sister podcasts, the Filthy FRB Show with Tom Lawler and Front Row Brian, covering MMA, pro wrestling, a whole bunch of stuff. And a show that recently got started, the T-Row and Funky Show. That's with Tommy Rollins and Ben Askren. They're more, I guess, amateur wrestling focused. And like I said on the last show, if you're a fan of MMA, learning more about AMI wrestling is something that's just going to broaden your knowledge of the sport. The Filthy FRB Show, you can find them on Twitter at Filthy FRB Show, and they have links to their show on all the big carriers. The same with the T-Row and Funky Show. They're on Twitter at TROW Funky Show. So shout outs to them, shout outs to the Mims, shout outs to our boy Alan in South Korea, our boy Hiro Shinwoo Yao the Truth. We hope Ramses is feeling better on the road to being back at 100%. I don't know if I said Ross Finkelstein the Jew. Our boy C. Lowenstein, the original co-pilot. Davey Boy. Damn. Who else? Everyone who fucks with us on the Twitters. Brooks B. Our boy Saggle Bud, he tweeted us, and I missed his tweet. He said Bendo gets favorable decision to extend contract if it goes 5. Game Breed gets screwed UFC Fairfax style, goes Iaquinta style. I think this might be Bendo's last fight, win or lose in the UFC. He's fighting out his contract. We will see what goes down with that. Of course, the Samurai, Gavin Gomez. Who else? Just all of them. Mystery Meds, Relapse, and of course, Sweet Pappy Jones. Pat, play it out for us.
Oh, well, Jake, you know what? You did such a good job shouting out the whole fam. Do such a great job crushing this show, crushing the production of all the other podcasts in the game right now. And it's always a pleasure to jump on with you. I'm ready for this South Korea show. Your boy's probably just going to get too turned, pass out on the couch, and end up having to watch it in the morning anyhow, like a fucking doctor. And, I predict a lot of that for our demographic as well. But you know what? Be it watching it live, watching it later on, I hope everyone enjoys the card. Hope everyone enjoys their night. It's always a pleasure doing this show with you, Jake, and always a pleasure talking with the fans.
We love you. We'll see you next week. No card to break down, but hopefully we'll get Alan on, talk a little Korea. Hopefully it's a busier week in MMA news, but rain or shine, we will be back next week. And then the week after that, it'll be a fun show. We'll be breaking down 3 cards, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday cards leading up to UFC 194, Aldo McGregor, Weidman, Rockhold. That's going to be fun. Until then, we'll see you next week on Twitter at the MMA Podcast. We gone.
Stay black.
Shut up, Jake. Tune into the MMA Podcast every Tuesday night.
Act the wild style, always been a foul child. Realize, sucker, I be the coming like Noah.
Sucker. The MMA Podcast, Jake is the host. And since Ramsey's been in a wheelchair, the Aunt Jimmy Show has been on the road. I wanna say John Jones is a host, so I think that I'll pick up the phone and dial 213-457-3380. We got hot takes on the stove. You get blood on your clothes if you're sitting in the front row. I throw on my gi and then I lace the hoops. I'll have Gal lying down cause he ain't the truth. And if Alan wasn't a cop, I'd mention you. And shout out to Ross Finkelstein the Jew. Cause according to you, you're an MMA guru. Approved Bisbing lost his hands Count Dooku. If you're a fancy boy, you get a 2-minute slot. Mystery wants a title shot. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I'm on the strap. But you know that I'll never tap. So listen to the MMA Podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. And you know that I won't tap. Mystery. The MMA Podcast. Most of us just live and breathe this fighting shit. Shut up, Jake. Shut up, Jake.